Chapter 1. The Call from Hell. The dust clung to everything in Afghanistan: gear, weapons, skin, even the air you breathe. The desert sun was merciless, hammering down on the forward operating base like it wanted to burn holes straight through the soldiers' helmets. Staff Sergeant Cameron Stafford sat on a weathered ammo crate outside the communications tent, unstrapping his gloves after a 12-hour patrol. He had the look of a man carved from stone. Sharp jaw, sunburned skin, eyes that had seen too much, and movements measured with soldier's precision. He didn't expect the runner who sprinted toward him, clutching a small satellite handset. Staff Sergeant Stafford, the young private said, breathing hard. Urgent call. Stateside. Your mother. Cameron frowned. Calls from home didn't come through unless something was wrong. Very wrong. He snatched the handset, stood, and walked a few steps away, already bracing himself for bad news. Mom. His voice carried the clipped tone of a soldier, but beneath it was the tremor of a son who feared what came next. For a moment, there was only static. Then her voice cracked through the line. Marjorie Stafford, usually calm and steady, sounded like she was on the verge of breaking. Cameron, she choked, gasping as though the words themselves were stabbing her throat. It's Elena, your little girl. Cameron's stomach clenched. He gripped the handset tighter, his knuckles widening. What about her? Mom, talk to me. Her sob shook the line. That bastard, your wife's new man, Dennis Church. He shoved her face into the fireplace. The world tilted. For a split second, Cameron couldn't breathe. His mind painted the image against his will. Elena, his 12-year-old, sweet and fiery daughter, screaming as flames kissed her skin. What? His voice dropped low, dangerous, the voice of a man on the edge of violence. He grabbed her, Cameron, by the hair. Said she mouthed off. He slammed her face into the fire. Marjorie's words came ragged, spilling like she'd been holding them back for hours. She's burned, baby. Your girl's burned. Cameron's throat went dry. Where is she now? She's here with me. I pulled her out of that house. Oh, Cameron. Marjorie's breath caught, then hardened. Before I could get her, I heard him tell her he'd finish the job tonight. Said he'd kill her. I swear it. The air around Cameron seemed to vanish. The desert heat, the chatter of soldiers, the distant thud of mortar drills, none of it existed anymore. All he heard was his mother's sobs and the echo of a threat made against his child. I'm coming home, Cameron said, voice raw, vibrating with fury. Please, hurry, Marjorie whispered. She's terrified. I've never seen her this scared. Cameron, that man, he's not just mean. He's evil. Static swallowed the line. Cameron snapped the handset closed, his hands shaking, not from fear, but from rage. He turned, eyes blazing, scanning the camp until they locked on Captain Rowe, his commanding officer. Rowe was coming out of the command post, adjusting his cap, when Cameron stormed toward him. Sir, Cameron barked, voice carrying the weight of a man at his breaking point. I need emergency leave. Right now. Rowe studied him, his taut posture, his trembling hands, the veins bulging at his neck. Talk. My daughter's in danger. My wife's new boyfriend assaulted her. He burned her face. Cameron's jaw clenched, and he threatened to kill her tonight. The captain's usual stone-hard face softened, just slightly. He had kids too. He knew. Rowe stepped closer, lowering his voice. You sure about this? Not exaggeration. Not a custody fight. Cameron's glare could have cut steel. Sir, I don't exaggerate when it comes to my daughter's life. You know me better than that. The silence stretched for a long, tense beat. Then Rowe gave a sharp nod. Say no more. He glanced at the nearest comms operator. Get him a flight. Now. The operator hesitated. Sir, there's nothing scheduled until... Rowe's voice cracked like a whip. Now. I don't care if you have to clear a medevac. This man is going home. Yes, sir. Cameron stood rigid, fists clenching and unclenching, fighting to keep his breathing steady. Images of Elena, her crooked smile, the way she used to beg for piggyback rides, her fierce little spirit, flashed in his mind. And then another image intruded. Her crying, her small face blistered with burns, Dennis's filthy hand gripping her hair. Rose studied him again, and for the first time, his commander's voice gentled. Staff Sergeant, I've seen that look before. You're not flying home for a talk. No, sir, Cameron said, his tone colder than the desert night. Rose stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. Then I'll say the words. Pack your gear. Chopper's ready. Cameron inhaled once, deep and steady, letting the words anchor him. But inside, a storm raged. He didn't just feel anger. He felt war boiling inside his chest, coiling tighter and tighter with every heartbeat. The battlefield had shifted from Afghanistan to his own home, but the mission was the same. Neutralize the threat, protect the innocent. Dennis Church had made a mistake. He thought Cameron Stafford was just another absent soldier husband, too far away to matter. He was wrong. Cameron wasn't flying home for a conversation. He was flying home for war. Chapter 2, Homecoming. The hum of the C-17 transport plane was steady and low, vibrating through Cameron's boots as he sat strapped in the narrow jump seat. Around him, a few soldiers slept under the dim cabin lights, their rifles propped between their knees. Cameron didn't sleep. Couldn't. His body sat rigid, but his mind was a battlefield. Every second was consumed by calculations, timelines, angles of approach, the variables of walking into a home that had become enemy territory. He clenched his fists until the tendons in his forearms bulged. The thought of Elena, her small frame, her sweet laughter, the way she used to sprint across the yard barefoot to leap into his arms, collided with the sickening image of her face pressed in a fire. His jaw ached from grinding his teeth. The flight was long, too long. Hours stretched like lifetimes, each one weighed down with memories. He remembered Elena's voice from their last video call, before the patrol that had taken him off base for weeks. She'd asked, "Daddy, when are you coming home?" Her eyes had been bright, but he'd caught the sadness hiding behind them. He'd smiled through the pixelated feed, promising her soon. But soon hadn't been soon enough. At one point, he pulled a small photo from his pocket, Elena at age 8, sitting on his shoulders, grinning with missing front teeth. He stared at it until his vision blurred. "Stay strong, baby girl," he muttered under his breath. "Daddy's coming." When the plane finally touched down stateside, the sun had just begun to bleed over the horizon. The military transport was greeted by silence. No ceremony, no banners, just a quick clearance through customs. Cameron stepped onto American soil, carrying only a rucksack, his uniform stiff with dust and sweat. Waiting for him just outside the gates was a battered blue sedan. The driver's window rolled down, revealing Marjorie Stafford, his mother. Her face was pale, eyes red from sleepless nights, hands trembling around the steering wheel. The moment she saw him, her lip quivered. She got out, rushing to embrace him. "Cameron." Her voice cracked. He hugged her tight, harder than he had since he was a boy. For a second, just a second, he allowed himself to lean into her warmth before pulling back. "How is she?" His voice was low, urgent. Marjorie shook her head, tears brimming. "She's strong. Stronger than I thought a 12-year-old could be. But she's scared, Cameron. She jumps at every noise. She barely sleeps." Her voice lowered to a whisper. Her face, Cameron's hands curled into fists. "What about Christina?" His mother's expression hardened. "She let him in. Months ago. This Dennis, he walked into that house like he owned it. She didn't fight him. Didn't stop him. She let him dominate everything, bank accounts, bills, even what Elena ate. And when Elena tried to defend her mother from his shouting, that's when he did it. Grabbed her by the hair. Shoved her face into the flames." The words carved into Cameron's mind like a blade. His chest tightened, fury simmering just beneath the surface. He slid into the passenger seat, his mother climbing back behind the wheel. As they drove, he stared straight ahead, jaw locked. "She told me herself," Marjorie continued, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. "Elena whispered it to me when I cleaned her bandages. She said, 'Grandma.' I told him to leave Mommy alone. And then he hurt me." Cameron shut his eyes, forcing back the image of Elena's little voice describing her pain. A soldier's mind filed facts quickly, but this one refused to be stored away. "It burned. She's a child," Marjorie said, voice breaking. "And that monster treated her like an enemy." Cameron's voice came out as gravel. Then I'll treat him like one. They pulled into Marjorie's driveway an hour later. Cameron shouldered his rucksack, scanning the perimeter like muscle memory. His eyes checked shadows, windows, cars passing slowly on the street. A soldier didn't stop being a soldier just because the battlefield changed. Inside, the house smelled of lavender and antiseptic. Cameron's boots thudded softly against the wooden floor. His eyes fell instantly to the couch, where Elena lay curled under a blanket, fast asleep. Her face was half hidden, but what he saw stole the air from his lungs. Red, angry burns traced across her cheek, bandaged in places. Her lips twitched in restless dreams. Cameron's knees almost buckled, but he held himself tall. Quietly, he crossed the room, kneeling beside her. His calloused fingers hovered inches from her bandaged face, careful not to touch. "I'm here, baby girl," he whispered, his voice breaking for the first time in years. "Daddy's here now." Elena stirred, eyes fluttering open. When she saw him, her small body bolted upright, arms flinging around his neck. "Daddy!" Her voice cracked with both joy and relief. Cameron held her, clutching her so tight he could feel her heartbeat against his chest. He kissed the top of her hair, closing his eyes as she wept softly against him. "You're safe," he murmured. "Nobody touches you again. I swear it." Behind him, Marjorie wiped her eyes, giving them space. Elena finally pulled back, her voice small. He said you weren't coming back. He said this is his house now." Cameron's jaw tightened. He smoothed her hair back gently. Eyes burning with rage, he kept buried for her sake. He was wrong. "I'm here, and no one takes my house. No one takes my little girl." Elena clung to him, and for a long time, nothing else mattered. Later, as she drifted back to sleep against his chest, Cameron stood at the window, staring out at the quiet street beyond. He didn't see suburbia, he saw terrain. Entry points, angles, threats. His training turned everything into a map of danger and advantage. He thought of Christina, of how she'd once promised to hold the family together, and how she'd betrayed both her husband and her daughter by letting a predator walk in. He thought of Dennis Church, the man who had scarred his little girl. And then, slowly, his mind settled into the steel-cold focus of a soldier preparing for war. Cameron Stafford wasn't coming back as a husband begging for explanations. He wasn't coming back as a victim's father waiting for justice from courts. He was coming back as a soldier. Cameron returned with a soldier's cold determination. He would reclaim his daughter, no matter the cost. Chapter 3: Infiltration and Confrontation. The night air in Colorado carried a sharp chill, the kind that cuts straight through the skin and into the bone. Cameron Stafford crouched in the shadow of a neighbor's pine tree, his eyes fixed on the two-story suburban home that was supposed to be his. Tonight, it was an enemy fortress. He scanned the perimeter the way he had 100 compounds overseas. Entry points: 2 ground-floor doors, for windows on the first level, 1 sliding glass door in the back. Curtains drawn, but not tight. A dim light glowed from the living room. The driveway was cluttered with Dennis Church's dented pickup truck and Christina's SUV, parked nose out for a quick escape. Cameron's pulse was steady. His training demanded it. But beneath the calm ran a vein of fury, hot, cold, and sharp all at once. Through the thin curtain gap, he spotted Christina first. His wife, her once radiant face now marred by a faint bruise near the cheekbone. She moved listlessly around the kitchen, shoulders slumped, head down, like a ghost in her own home. Then he saw Dennis Church. The man lounged on Cameron's couch, legs spread arrogantly wide, a beer bottle dangling from his hand. He wore Cameron's house like a crown he hadn't earned. And then, his chest constricted, he saw Elena. His daughter sat curled in the corner of the couch, her bandaged face turned toward the floor, hands fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. Fear radiated from her small frame. Cameron's hand tightened around the knife strapped inside his jacket. He moved closer, crouching beneath the open window where the faint hum of conversation leaked out. Dennis's voice was a sneer, thick with beer and arrogance. "Your daddy's not coming back, kid. This is my house now. Get used to it." Elena's small, trembling voice broke the silence. "He'll come for me. He always comes back." Dennis laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "You stupid little brat. He's halfway across the world, and if he cared, he'd be here. But he's not, is he?" Cameron's jaw clenched, so hard hurt. Elena's whisper was defiant, though laced with fear. "He's better than you'll ever be." The crack of glass on wood made Cameron's heart jolt. Dennis had slammed his beer bottle onto the coffee table, leaning forward with menace. "You watch that mouth, or I'll teach you a lesson you'll never forget." That was it. Cameron moved. The soldier slid along the siding, feet silent on the damp grass. He reached the back, jimmied the sliding door with a flick of his blade, and slipped inside without a sound. Every step was deliberate, heel to toe, avoiding creaks in the wood. His eyes adjusted quickly, cataloging the familiar layout that felt suddenly foreign. Kitchen to the right, hallway straight, living room glow spilling down the hall. He advanced. From the shadows, he watched Dennis lean closer to Elena, his voice dripping venom. Christina stood frozen, a silent bystander in her own house. "Say it again," Dennis hissed. "Say your daddy's better than me." Elena's chin lifted with brave defiance. "He is." Cameron struck. In 2 strides, he was on Dennis. One hand clamped on the back of the man's neck, slamming him into the couch cushions. The other hand pressed the edge of his combat knife under Dennis's chin, cold steel biting skin. Dennis froze, eyes bulging, breath hitching as he recognized the man looming over him. "Guess what, Dennis?" Cameron's voice was ice. "Daddy came home." The living room erupted. Christina gasped, stumbling back against the wall, her hands flying to her mouth. Elena cried out, scrambling off the couch, but her wide, tearful eyes lit with relief when she saw who it was. Dennis tried to snarl, but the knife nicked his throat, drawing a bead of blood. You crazy son of shut your mouth," Cameron growled, pressing the blade harder. "You put your hands on my daughter. You scarred her, and now you're going to answer for it." Dennis's bravado faltered, but only for a moment. "She needed discipline. Your wife knows it. Don't you, Christina?" Cameron's eyes flicked up, searing Christina where she stood. Her silence was deafening. She trembled, tears sliding down her bruised cheek, but no words came. "Pathetic," Cameron spat. Elena's small hands clutched his arm. "Daddy, please, don't kill him." Her voice cracked, begging. Cameron's fury wavered. He looked at his daughter, her eyes swollen from crying, her bandages raw, her tiny body shaking, and his grip trembled. The knife wavered just enough for Dennis to sense an opening. Dennis sneered, forcing bravado through his fear. "Yeah, listen to your little girl, Stafford. You're not a killer. Not here. Not in your pretty suburban living room." Cameron leaned in closer, his breath hot against Dennis's ear. "You don't know what I am." But Elena's plea broke through the fog of rage. He wouldn't let her see him become a monster. Not tonight. He yanked Dennis off the couch, shoving him face first into the floor, knee digging into the man's spine. The knife stayed poised at the back of his neck. Outside, a dog barked. Then the sound of sirens. Faint at first, but growing. Red and blue lights flickered across the curtains. Christina gasped, panic flashing in her eyes. The neighbors, they must have called. Cameron's mind snapped into combat clarity. He couldn't be taken in, not yet. Not while Elena was still vulnerable. "Elena," he said sharply, eyes never leaving Dennis, "go to Grandma's. Now." "She's waiting." "But now?" His tone softened a fraction when he saw her flinch. "It's okay, baby girl. Daddy's got you. Go." Tears streaked her cheeks as she nodded, slipping past her frozen mother and dashing toward the front door. Dennis squirmed beneath him, hissing through clenched teeth. "You think this ends tonight?" "You think." Cameron shoved his face harder into the carpet. "It ends when I say it ends." The sirens wailed louder, tires crunching against pavement. He had seconds. With a final shove, he released Dennis, stepping back just as heavy fists pounded the door. Officers shouting. Dennis rolled to his knees, coughing, clutching his throat. Blood trickled where the blade had nicked him, but his eyes burned with defiance. Not broken. Not yet. Cameron retreated into the shadows of the kitchen, slipping out the back the same way he came, silent as a ghost. Behind him, The front door crashed open. Shouts filled the house. But Elena was safe. For now. Dennis Church had been taken, but not broken. Chapter 4: Allies and Intelligence. The next 48 hours moved like a blur through smoke and glass. The police had stormed the house, pulling Cameron's knife from Dennis Church's throat only minutes after he slipped out the back. They questioned Christina in a hushed corner while Elena clung to Marjorie outside, refusing to let go of her grandmother's hand. By morning, Child Protective Services had documented every bandage and bruise on Elena's face. Photographs, medical reports, testimony, cold evidence stacked high in sterile folders. Cameron stood in the hallway outside the sterile exam room, his jaw set, his arms crossed. Elena's small voice filtered through the door as she answered CPS's questions. Every word was another dagger. When a social worker finally emerged, folder in hand, she nodded at him. "We've seen enough. This is abuse. Severe abuse." Cameron only nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He already knew. He had lived it in the flash of his daughter's eyes. But the system, as always, was slower than the violence it tried to contain. Dennis was arrested on charges of assault and child endangerment. Yet less than 24 hours later, the man walked free on bail, swaggering out of the courthouse with Christina at his side. Marjorie spat when she saw the news. They're letting wolves roam while the lamb's still bleeding. Cameron said nothing. He just stared at the screen until his reflection blurred in the glass. The military wanted him back. His commanding officer called, urging him to return to Afghanistan to finish his tour. But Cameron's decision had already hardened into iron. He walked into the office, saluted, and laid his papers down. "Effective immediately, sir. I'm done. My daughter needs me." The CO studied him for a long time before nodding. "You've given more than most. Go protect what's yours." And just like that, Staff Sergeant Cameron Stafford became simply Cameron, the soldier who traded wars abroad for the one waiting at home. But he wasn't going to fight it alone. His first call was to Wesley Webster, a military family lawyer with a reputation for cutting through red tape like a scalpel. They met in a cramped office downtown, walls lined with case files and law books that smelled of dust and ink. Webster was sharp-eyed, wiry, his suit hanging off him like he'd borrowed it from someone heavier. But when he leaned across the desk, voice low, his words cut with precision. "You've got leverage. CPS files, medical records, photographs, and Elena's testimony." He tapped his pen against the desk. "But the mother is still legally custodial. As long as she's standing with this Dennis, courts are slow to react. You need to make this airtight." "I don't care about airtight," Cameron said, his tone like gravel. "I care about safe." Webster studied him, then leaned back. "Safe takes allies." Cameron's next ally was Felix Goodrich, a private investigator he'd once worked with indirectly on a fraud case involving military contractors. Felix was heavy-set, with a receding hairline and a taste for cigars that clung to his clothes. They met in a diner booth, steam rising from mugs of black coffee. "Church," Cameron said, sliding a photograph across the table. "I want to know where he sleeps, who he talks to, what he owes, and who he's scared of." Felix smirked, puffing on his unlit cigar. "That all? Start there." 2 days later, Goodrich called. "Your boy Dennis has more skeletons than a graveyard. He owes 60 grand to a trafficker named Luis Ellison. Word is Ellison's squeezing him hard." Cameron's grip on the phone tightened. "What does a man like that do when he's desperate?" "You don't want the answer," Felix said darkly. "I need it anyway." There was a pause, then Felix sighed. "He'll look for quick cash. Fastest payout for men like him? Kids. He's already floated the idea of selling someone close to him. Elena fits the bill." The words hollowed Cameron out. He sat in silence, his fist white around the receiver, the photo of his daughter in his free hand. His final call was to Timothy Schroeder, an old demolitions expert from his unit. They hadn't spoken in years, but when Tim picked up, his voice boomed through the line with the same reckless energy Cameron remembered. "Staff Sergeant Stafford, heard you quit the sandbox. What's a mission?" Cameron told him, detail by detail. There was no hesitation on Tim's end. "Then count me in," Schroeder said. "If some bastard's threatening Elena, then he's threatening family." And family doesn't get left behind. The circle was complete. A lawyer who could navigate the system, a PI who could dig up dirt, and a demolitions man who knew how to make problems disappear. They gathered in Marjorie's kitchen late one night, the table cluttered with folders, photographs, and maps. The smell of coffee hung thick in the air. Felix laid out documents showing Dennis's debts, his late-night meetings with Ellison's men, the escalating threats. Wesley listed the legal options, restraining orders, emergency custody petitions, but even he admitted the courts would move slower than Dennis's desperation. Tim, arms folded, said only one thing. You can't wait for the system. You know that, Cam. You wait. You lose her. Cameron nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on Elena's school photo propped against a folder. Her shy smile stared back at him, bandages peeking at the edge of the frame. This isn't just about me anymore, he said finally, his voice low but steady. It's not just revenge. He's in debt to a trafficker, and if it comes down to it, he'll sell her to cover it. The room fell silent. The weight of his words settled over them all. Cameron's eyes hardened, his jaw like stone. This isn't personal anymore. This is war. Cameron realizes the fight is no longer personal revenge. It's war against a predator. Chapter 5, The Setup. Cameron had spent his career planning operations where a single misstep could cost men their lives. But this wasn't Kandahar or Helmand. This was Colorado suburbia, and the enemy was living in his old house, touching his daughter's things, poisoning her air. Around Marjorie's oak kitchen table, the War Council formed. Maps, burner phones, folders of surveillance photos, and a steaming pot of coffee were laid out like weapons. The low hum of the refrigerator filled the silences between words. Tim Schroeder leaned forward, forearms resting on the wood. We can't just hit Dennis head on. The cops already think you're trigger-happy after that blade stunt. We do this loud. You're in cuffs before Elena's safe. Wesley Webster adjusted his glasses, ever the lawyer among soldiers. And the courts won't protect Elena quickly enough. Christina's still siding with him. She'll swear up and down she never saw Dennis lay a hand on the girl. Cameron said nothing, only stared at the photograph of Dennis, taken by Felix Goodrich. The man was grinning in a bar parking lot, one arm wrapped around Christina like he'd already won. Cameron's jaw tightened. Finally, Goodrich cleared his throat. There's a way. A setup. We bait him. Get him in deep enough that when he moves, we're already holding the rope to hang him. Cameron's eyes flicked up. Talk. Goodrich spread a new set of photos across the table. Grainy shots of Dennis in dim clubs, shaking hands with men tied to Luis Ellison. Dennis is drowning in debt. Ellison's already threatened to collect. He's desperate. That's the pressure point. Debt makes men reckless, Cameron muttered. Exactly, which is why we give him a reckless solution. Goodrich tapped the photo. We feed him a job he can't resist. Quick payout. No risk, or so he'll think. Who plays the hook? Tim asked. Goodrich smiled. I know, man. Porterdale, con man by trade, but smoother than silk. He can sell Dennis a dream of fast money. 2 nights later, Porter arrived. He was nothing like Cameron expected. Slim, stylish, with a grin that could melt suspicion off a cop's face. His handshake was warm, but his eyes, sharp and calculating, belonged to a predator of a different breed. So you're the staff sergeant, Porter said, sliding into the chair across from Cameron. Heard a lot about you. Mostly that you don't blink. I don't have time for games, Cameron replied flatly. Can you bait him? Porter smirked. Dennis Church? Please. Men like him are easy. They're loud dogs that think they're wolves. I dangle a bone. He'll trip over himself to bite. What kind of bone? Tim asked. A fake drug run. Low risk, high reward. I tell him he drives a van, drops it at a warehouse, and pockets 10 grand. All he has to do is trust me. Porter leaned back, folding his hands behind his head. And trust me, he will. Cameron studied him carefully. And if he doesn't bite? Porter's grin widened. Oh, he'll bite. He's hungry. And hungry dogs don't check the trap before they stick their necks in. The second phase belonged to Goodrich. He had already begun planting seeds with Christina, calling her from a burner number under the guise of being a private investigator hired to check up on Dennis. Christina's voice, recorded on Goodrich's device, carried the tremble of a woman who'd lost her footing. He's not who I thought he was, she admitted one night. Her words spilling after Goodrich fed her a string of carefully tailored lies. He's angry all the time. And Elena, she keeps saying I don't protect her. But her voice cracked. I didn't know it was this bad. Goodrich killed the line before she could backpedal, his smile grim. She's breaking. Won't take much more before she gives me everything I need on record. Cameron listened to the tape in silence, his fists tightening. He wanted to hate Christina, wanted to curse her for letting a man like Dennis near Elena. But the soldier in him only registered one thing. Intelligence was leverage, and leverage was power. The third phase, the darkest, was Cameron's alone. He didn't speak of it to Marjorie, or even Wesley the lawyer. This wasn't about courts or strategy. This was about ensuring that Dennis Church would never again lay a hand on Elena or any child. He mapped out routes in his notebook, rehearsed contingencies in the quiet hours of dawn. He carried himself with the cold focus of a sniper, setting his crosshairs. Every move, every word, every expression he'd wear when facing Dennis again was rehearsed until instinct replaced thought. It wasn't about rage anymore. Rage was messy, left trails. This was about control, about making sure whatever happened to Dennis looked like the inevitable result of his own bad choices. The team gathered once more to finalize the plan. The kitchen table was now a battlefield map. Phase 1, Porter said, pointing at a folder with Dennis's name scrawled across it. I make the approach to the club. Flash some cash, talk about a quick job. He'll salivate. Within 48 hours, he'll be begging me for details. Phase 2, Goodrich added, sliding Christina's taped confessions into a file. I tighten the screws on Christina. She confesses Dennis's abuse and his debts. With that recorded, we have leverage in court and enough pressure to keep her from protecting him. And Phase 3, Cameron said, his voice low, steady. When Dennis moves on the job, I move on him. Quiet, clean, untraceable. He will not touch Elena again. The room fell silent. Even Tim, usually the joker, kept his mouth shut. Finally, Porter let out a low whistle. Damn, soldier, you don't play checkers. You play chess with landmines. Cameron didn't smile. He reached for Elena's photo, setting it square in the middle of the table. This isn't a game, he said. This is my daughter's life. No one argued. Over the next week, the machine began to turn. Porter wove his way into Dennis's world like smoke, buying drinks, telling stories, flashing counterfeit bills that looked convincingly real under the bar's neon glow. Dennis laughed too loud, leaned in too close, already intoxicated by the promise of quick cash. Goodrich, meanwhile, kept Christina talking. Each call peeled away another layer of denial. Her voice trembled as she admitted things she never had before. The nights Dennis came home reeking of alcohol, the bruises she covered with makeup, the moments she turned away when Elena cried. Each admission went on a tape, each tape into Wesley's growing arsenal of legal firepower. And Cameron prepared. He sharpened blades, cleaned weapons he might never fire, memorized exit routes, studied traffic patterns. He watched Elena sleep at night, her breathing soft, her bandages healing. Each rise and fall of her chest was a promise he etched deeper into his bones. By the 7th night, the operation was no longer an idea. It was alive, moving, breathing. 3 phases, 3 men playing their parts. One soldier prepared to finish what others could only plan. Every step was coldly planned. Every move was a soldier's strategy. Cameron and his allies had built the trap. Now it was time to spring it. Chapter 6, The Trap Springs. The plan had been set like a steel-jawed snare, and now all that was left was for the prey to step inside. Porter Dale was in his element. He strolled into the seedy pool hall where Dennis spent most nights, reeking of cheap whiskey and bravado, like a man who owned the place. His shirt was pressed, his watch gleamed under the flickering neon, and he carried himself with the casual arrogance of someone who could pay the whole room's bar tab without blinking. Dennis noticed him instantly. That was the kind of man Dennis wanted to be. Someone people looked at with envy instead of disgust. He swaggered over, tried to puff himself up taller than he was. You again, Dennis drawled, already halfway drunk. Thought you said you were headed out of town. Porter leaned against the bar, flashing a wad of bills, stage money, but crisp enough to pass. Business call me back. Good business. Problem is, I can't trust just anyone. Need a man willing to keep his mouth shut, drive a van across town, and not ask questions. Simple job. Pays 10 large. Dennis's eyes lit up at the number, but he forced a laugh. 10 grand for a drive? You think I'm stupid? Porter smiled lazily. No, I think you're broke. And I think you owe Ellison 80 grand. The words landed like a punch. Dennis's grin faltered, eyes narrowing. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I know. Porter leaned closer, lowering his voice. Ellison doesn't forgive. He doesn't forget. But me? I've got a job that'll square you up. One run. Easy as breathing. He tapped the stack of bills against Dennis's chest. Or you can wait until Ellison's boys knock on your door and ask for payment in flesh. Dennis swallowed hard, greed and fear warring in his bloodshot eyes. Finally, he snatched the money sample, tucking it into his pocket. When? Tomorrow night, Porter said smoothly. But you bring no one. Just you. Otherwise, Ellison will think you're playing him. The next night, the trap snapped shut. Dennis pulled the rusted van into a warehouse on the city's edge. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight the knuckles blanched white. Sweat dripped down his temple, though the night was cool. Inside, shadows moved, Ellison's men, tall, broad, faces carved from stone. The smell of oil and gunpowder clung to the air. Dennis climbed out, trying to mask his nerves with false bravado. Where's Porter? He said this was simple. One of Ellison's men stepped forward, tattoos curling up his neck. Porter set the table. We're here to collect. Collect what? Dennis barked, his voice cracking. I brought the van. The man smirked. Ellison doesn't want the van. He wants his 80,000. Tonight. Dennis's jaw dropped. 80? I don't have it. The warehouse filled with cruel laughter. Another man shoved him against the hood. Then maybe we take something else. Your woman's worthless, but the kid, Dennis froze, rage exploding across his face. Don't you dare talk about her. Ellison says a child fetches more than 80 grand in the right market. The tattooed man leaned in close, whispering in his ear. Maybe we take her instead. Dennis shoved him back, eyes wild. You touch Elena, I'll kill every last one of you. The men circled tighter, like wolves teasing a bleeding deer. One shoved a pistol into Dennis's chest. Another clipped him hard across the jaw. Blood spilled from his lip, but Dennis still roared, spittle flying. I'll get you the money. Just give me time. Time's up. The gun pressed harder. Dennis's heart thundered. He was cornered, desperate, and more dangerous than ever. And somewhere in the dark, unseen, Cameron's allies were watching. Across town, a different kind of trap was snapping shut. Christina Stafford sat across from Felix Goodrich, her hands shaking around a glass of wine she hadn't touched. The little cafe was quiet, the hum of conversation masking their low voices. Goodrich wore his disguise well, just another investigator in a cheap suit, pretending to be sympathetic. Christina, I need you to be honest with me. These things don't just go away. Courts don't look kindly on silence. Her eyes darted away, shame flooding her features. You don't understand. Dennis, he said he'd change. He promised. And she faltered. I didn't want to be alone. Goodrich slid a small recorder closer. What about Elena? Her voice cracked. I thought if I just loved him enough, he'd treat her better. But she kept talking back, kept making him angry, and Christina buried her face in her hands. He hurt her. I knew. I saw. And I chose him anyway. The words hung in the air like a confession in a church, heavy and unforgivable. Goodrich's tone sharpened just slightly, pressing the wound. So you're saying Dennis abused your daughter, and you let it happen? Yes, she whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. Yes, I let it happen. In another room, far away, Cameron listened to the recording feed live through Goodrich's wire. His face was carved from stone. Not a flicker of sympathy crossed his eyes as Christina's sobs echoed in his ears. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it might crack under the weight of his fury. She had said it herself, out loud, on tape. She had chosen Dennis over Elena. Cameron's grip tightened around the armrest until the wood creaked. The soldier in him cataloged the confession clinically, evidence, leverage, ammunition. The father in him cataloged it as betrayal beyond forgiveness. He didn't storm out. He didn't shout. He simply sat, silent and cold, letting her words etch themselves into his resolve. Back in the warehouse, Dennis screamed at Ellison's men, veins bulging in his neck as he flailed against their grip. His rage had made him unpredictable, volatile, like a cornered animal ready to bite off his own leg if it meant escape. "Your daddy's not coming back," he had once sneered at Elena. Now those words echoed back at him, mocking, hollow, because Cameron was coming, and Dennis didn't even know it yet. But that was for later. For now, the trap was sprung. Dennis was in over his head, surrounded by predators who wanted his blood or his daughter. Christina was unraveling, her confessions spilling out like poison. And Cameron was listening to it all, eyes as cold as steel, heart no longer beating with mercy. Chapter 7, The Final Hunt. The mountain roads outside Denver were slick with rain, headlights cutting through the mist in broken beams. Cameron sat in a black SUV a mile back, watching the faint glow of Dennis's truck through binoculars. His pulse was steady, his breathing even, like a sniper settling into a familiar rhythm. Beside him, Timothy Schroeder checked the detonator in his lap. The device was small, unassuming, patched together from standard military ordnance and civilian hardware. Effective. Quiet. Signal's good, Schroeder murmured. Once he hits the bridge, one button and that engine's done. He won't get more than 100 yards on foot before we're on him. Cameron lowered the binoculars. We don't kill him here. Not yet. He needs to be alive long enough to hang himself. Wesley Webster, hunched in a back seat with his laptop glowing, smirked. Trust me, he's been hanging himself all week. You want to hear this? He tapped the key, and Dennis's voice filled the SUV, recorded through the bug Porter had planted in his jacket. Ellison's crew wants their payment. If I can get the girl, they'll take her. That squares me. That buys me out. Cameron's knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. The words had no shock value anymore, only confirmation. Dennis had crossed the final line. Schroeder muttered, "He's selling his own stepdaughter." Piece of quiet, Cameron cut in sharply. His eyes never left the faint glow of Dennis's truck up ahead. His mind was already building scenarios, exits, contingencies. The bridge came into view, a narrow steel span over a ravine, just wide enough for two vehicles to pass if neither flinched. Dennis's truck rolled onto it, engine growling, tires hissing on wet pavement. Schroeder waited for Cameron's nod. It came like a command from a general to a trusted lieutenant, brief, absolute. Click. The truck jerked violently, sparks bursting from under the hood. Steam billowed. Dennis swore loudly, slamming the wheel, coasting the vehicle to the shoulder. Cameron killed the SUV's headlights and parked 100 yards back, cloaked in darkness. He opened his door, stepping out into the rain with the silence of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. Schroeder followed, rifle slung low, eyes scanning. Dennis was out of the truck, cursing, kicking at the bumper. He popped the hood, leaning into the steam. Piece of junk. Not now, damn it, not now. Cameron watched from the shadows, cataloging every detail. The twitch in Dennis's jaw, the desperate way he kept checking the road behind him. A hunted man who hadn't yet realized the predators were already here. Let him stew, Cameron murmured. He'll call Ellison. He'll show us everything. Back in Denver, Christina Stafford staggered into a dingy motel room, clutching her ribs. Her mascara was smeared from tears, her blouse torn where Dennis had grabbed her earlier. She tried dialing her phone with shaking hands. Felix? Please. I can't do this anymore. He knows I talked to someone. He said if I ever try to leave, he'll... Her voice broke into sobs. A slam at the door cut her off. Dennis's voice thundered from outside. Christina, open this damn door. She froze, clutching the phone to her chest. The pounding grew louder, the door rattling on its hinges. You think you can run from me? You think anyone's going to protect you? His voice was hoarse with rage, edged with a desperation that terrified her more than the blows. Christina backed against the wall, sliding down to the floor, whispering through trembling lips. "God, please, someone stop him." The phone slipped from her hand. On the other end, Goodrich was already recording everything, jaw clenched as he listened. On the bridge, Dennis paced like a cornered wolf. Phone pressed to his ear. "Ellison. Yeah, it's me. The truck's dead. Sabotage, I swear. But listen, I've got it figured out. The girl's the payment. Tonight, I'll grab her, deliver her myself. You hear me? That buys me clean. You tell your men to back off." Static. Then a low, amused laugh from the other end. Dennis's face twisted. "Don't laugh at me, you son of a—" "I said I'll get her. You'll see." He ended the call, panting, eyes darting into the dark. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead, dripping into his wild eyes. He didn't know he was being watched, didn't know Cameron stood less than 50 yards away, silent as a shadow, listening to every word. Inside the SUV, Webster closed his laptop with deliberate care. That's it. That's the nail in the coffin. He's just plotted the abduction of a child over a federal wire. Schroeder's grip tightened on his rifle. So we end it. Right here. Right now. Cameron didn't answer immediately. He was still staring through the rain, watching Dennis scream at the storm, spit flying from his mouth as he shouted promises to ghosts. Then, finally, Cameron turned back toward his men, his face carved from stone. "No, we do it by protocol, by design. He doesn't get chaos. He gets precision." Webster tilted his head. "Which protocol?" For a long moment, only the rain answered. Then Cameron's voice cut through the storm, cold and certain. "Phoenix." Schroeder blinked. "Phoenix protocol? You sure?" Cameron's eyes didn't waver. "I'm done letting them circle us. Dennis, Christina, both of them. This ends now. Phoenix protocol ensures neither can ever threaten Elena again." He pulled the hood of his jacket over his head, the rain dripping off the brim. "Authorize it." Chapter 8, Elimination. The desert outside Pueblo stretched endless and silent beneath a bruised purple sky. The stars hadn't yet broken through, and the horizon shimmered with dying heat. It was the kind of place where a man could vanish without a whisper. Cameron chose it for that reason. Dennis Church thought he was driving to a drug deal that would solve his debts, a final handoff with quick money. Instead, he was driving into his own grave. The lure porter had done his part perfectly. He leaned against the rusted shell of a burned-out sedan at the rendezvous point, cigarette glowing faintly. When Dennis's borrowed car rattled over the dirt, Porter raised a hand in greeting, casual as if they were two buddies meeting for beers. "You got the product?" Dennis barked through the open window, eyes wild and sunken from sleepless nights. Porter smirked. "Product's waiting. Just park over there. We'll keep it quiet." Dennis hesitated, scanning the barren land around them, suspicion written all over his face. But greed was stronger than instinct. He killed the engine and stepped out, glancing at the duffel bag slung over Porter's shoulder. "Where's Ellison's crew?" Dennis demanded. "They'll be here." Porter tossed the cigarette and gestured toward the shadows. "Come on. We don't do business in the open." Dennis cursed under his breath, but followed. His boots crunched gravel as he moved deeper into the dark, exactly where Cameron's men waited. The ambush had happened with military precision. Schroeder struck first, looping an arm around Dennis's throat from behind, dragging him backward with the force of a bear trap snapping shut. Dennis thrashed, spitting curses, but before he could draw breath, Cameron stepped from the shadows. One punch, hard, surgical, drove into Dennis's gut, folding him in half. He collapsed to his knees, gasping. "What the hell? Who are you people?" he wheezed. Cameron crouched in front of him, calm as a surgeon. Rain from the earlier storm still clung to his jacket, dripping slowly onto the dirt. "You already know who I am." Dennis's eyes widened. Recognition. Terror. He tried to scramble backward, but Schroeder's grip forced him down. Cameron leaned closer, voice low, lethal. "You hurt my daughter. You threatened her life. Tonight, you answer for it." Dennis's bravado cracked, replaced by shrill panic. "No, wait, listen. It wasn't me, it was Ellison. He pushed me into it." I was gonna fix everything, I swear. Cameron's expression never changed. Ellison's problem is already being handled. You're the loose end. Porter stepped up, kicking Dennis's legs out, so he sprawled face first in the dirt. Man, you should have seen this coming. You don't mess with a soldier's family. Dennis clawed at the ground, eyes darting for escape, but the desert was empty and merciless. His own echo mocked him. The last words, please, Dennis stammered, his voice breaking. Don't do this. I'll disappear. I'll never come near her again. Just let me go. Cameron squatted beside him, meeting his frantic gaze. Disappear? That's exactly what's going to happen. But not on your terms. For a flicker of a moment, the soldier's mask slipped, revealing the father beneath, haunted, furious, heartbroken. You shoved my little girl's face into fire. You laughed while she screamed. Do you think there's a world where I let that stand? Dennis's lips trembled, words failing him. Cameron rose slowly, giving a short nod to Schroeder. A burlap sack dropped over Dennis's head. His scream muffled, his body thrashed, but it was already decided. He was dragged toward the shallow pit they'd dug earlier that afternoon. The earth soft enough to take him, but hard enough to keep him. The desert, grave the sound of shovels scraping, filled the night. Dennis's muffled cries dwindled into silence as his body was swallowed by dirt. Every spadeful was measured, efficient, final. Porter lit another cigarette, the glow briefly illuminating his smirk. That's that. No body, no questions. Webster, standing with arms crossed, added quietly, Paperwork's already seated. The note you forged, Porter, reads like a suicide. Local cops will eat it up. Man drowning in debt. Vanished into the desert. It fits. Cameron stared at the mound of fresh earth, his face unreadable. For him, this wasn't victory. It wasn't satisfaction. It was necessity. Mark it, he ordered. Schroeder planted a rusted pipe near the grave, unremarkable amid desert junk. Nothing would draw attention. Dennis Church no longer existed. Christina's spiral miles away. Christina Stafford stumbled south, leaving a trail of motel receipts and half-empty liquor bottles. Her life unraveled without Dennis to cling to, her shame and regret gnawing like rats at her mind. At a border town dive bar, she sat hunched over a glass, hair greasy, eyes bloodshot. I had a daughter, she slurred to no one in particular. She looked at me like I was the monster. Not him. Me. The bartender used the confessions drowned in whiskey, just wiped the counter and moved on. Christina's voice cracked, sliding into incoherent sobs. Night after night, she drank harder, slipping deeper. Her health collapsed, her liver failing, her body giving up. One morning, they found her slumped over in a rented room, bottles still in her hand, eyes glassy and unseeing. Her death notice barely filled a paragraph in the local paper. Cause: complications from alcohol abuse. No one claimed her body. Ellison's crew, while Dennis rotted in the desert and Christina drowned herself in liquor, the last enemy target was dismantled with surgical precision. Felix Goodrich's investigation mapped Ellison's network like veins on a hand. False intel was planted, rival gangs tipped off at the right moments. Raids unfolded with uncanny timing, each one crushing another piece of the operation. Ellison's lieutenants turned on one another under pressure. Guns seized, stash houses raided, accounts frozen. By the time law enforcement pieced together the chaos, Ellison's empire had collapsed, absorbed by rivals who thought they'd won a turf war. In truth, it was Cameron's quiet war. Every thread cut, every pawn removed, until nothing of Ellison's reach remained. Justice in shadows, Cameron returned home one dawn, desert dust still clinging to his boots. Elena was asleep on the couch, clutching a stuffed animal, her face healing but still marked. He stood in the doorway, watching her breathe, and finally allowed himself a long, steady exhale. The war was over. Not declared in headlines, not written in history books, but in shadows, in silence, where true justice often lives. Dennis was gone, Christina undone, Ellison's empire shattered. The threats had been erased, one by one. Cameron whispered into the stillness, voice gravelly, final. It's done. Chapter 9. The New Beginning. The early morning sun poured through the half-open blinds, cutting golden stripes across the small living room. Cameron Stafford sat on the edge of the couch, coffee steaming in a chipped mug, watching Elena fumble with her guitar. She was 6 months into their new life, and Cameron still measured every detail, her laughter, her frowns, the way she moved with cautious confidence around the empty spaces that had once held fear. "Dad," Elena said, strumming a chord that squeaked, "do I have to start over every time I learn something new?" Cameron smiled faintly, leaning back. "No, you just get stronger every time. Every mistake teaches you a little more." Elena tilted her head, chewing her bottom lip. "Like martial arts?" "Exactly like martial arts," Cameron said. "You fall, you get back up. Stronger, faster, smarter." Her eyes shone with the tiny spark of pride he hadn't seen for months. "I'm getting better. My kicks don't look like twigs anymore." Cameron's lips twitched. Twigs have a habit of snapping if you're not careful. But even twigs can be strong if you bend them right. Routine and healing the mornings followed a quiet rhythm. Cameron rose early, slipping into his security consultant work, a mix of private clients and corporate contracts. It allowed him to keep his hand on the pulse of threats without dragging Elena into the darker world he had fought to erase. Elena, meanwhile, found her own routines. Martial arts classes kept her agile, her mind disciplined, and her body strong. Guitar lessons became her refuge, her music a voice for the feelings she didn't yet have the words to say. "Dad, listen to this," she said one evening, playing a soft melody that trembled like glass. "It's sad but happy at the same time." Cameron nodded, listening without interruption. There was no advice, no correction, just presence. For the first time in months, he realized silence could be as powerful as action. Making friends at school, Elena had been shy at first, shrinking in corners and clutching her books. But over weeks, she discovered classmates who were curious, funny, and resilient in their own ways. She met a boy named Marcus who could juggle oranges, a girl named Layla who loved drawing monsters, and another girl, Priya, who had a way of making her laugh even when she didn't want to. One afternoon, Cameron arrived early for pickup and watched Elena run across the playground. She laughed freely, hair bouncing, cheeks flushed from exertion. She collided into Priya, and both girls tumbled into the grass, giggling uncontrollably. Cameron felt a strange warmth, a relief he hadn't allowed himself to feel since the chaos with Dennis and Christina. For the first time, it looked like Elena wasn't just surviving, she was living. Subtle shadows, yet Cameron's watchful instincts never fully rested. He followed subtle patterns. A car, too, slowly passing their street. A man loitering near the park, the click of a camera shutter in the distance. He kept threats far away, silent and invisible, the way a predator might guard its prey without disturbing the world. "Elena, pack up your guitar. Time for dinner," he called one afternoon. She groaned but complied. "You're always so serious, Dad." "I have to be serious sometimes," he said mildly. "But not always." She tossed the instrument into its case, smirking. "Promise you'll let me play for your clients next week?" Cameron chuckled softly. "We'll see. Only if they promise not to throw tomatoes." Conversations about Christina every so often. Elena asked questions, small, probing, lingering like threads Cameron wasn't ready to cut entirely. "Dad," she said one evening, after their dinner dishes were washed and put away, "will Mom ever come back?" Cameron's fingers froze on the counter, soap slippery. He turned slowly, meeting her earnest, wide eyes. There was no malice in her question, just hope tinged with confusion. "Your mom is sick," he said carefully, voice steady. "And right now, she's far away, getting better." Elena's brow furrowed. "Really? She's really sick?" Cameron crouched to her level, resting a hand on her shoulder. "I promise you, sweetie, she's away. She's not in our lives right now, and that's okay. We've got each other." She tilted her head, considering this, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I guess she just isn't ready to be around yet." "Exactly," Cameron said, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. "And we'll make sure the people around us are always the right ones. Safe, strong, and kind." That's what matters. She hugged him, brief but firm, like a tiny anchor in the storm. Small victories days passed with a quiet, almost domestic grace. Cameron noticed little things that hinted at Elena's recovery. Her laughter lasting longer at the playground, the way she balanced herself in sparring class, the chords of a new song she wrote on her guitar. One Saturday morning, he found her perched on the porch steps, notebook in hand, scribbling furiously. "What's that?" he asked. She looked up, eyes bright. "A song. About being brave. About being me again." Cameron crouched beside her, glancing at the messy sheet of paper. The words were uneven, hesitant, but the meaning rang clear. Survival, growth, hope. "You're brave," he said quietly, "and I'm proud every single day." She smiled shyly, cheeks turning pink. "Thanks, Dad. I think I'm finally starting to feel okay." A quiet peace evenings became their sanctuary. Dinner, homework, practice, music, bedtime stories, they were small, ordinary things that stitched life back together. Cameron still maintained the discipline of a soldier. Early mornings, training sessions, and constant vigilance. But beneath the structured routine was a protective warmth, a commitment to ensure Elena's safety and happiness. Occasionally, Cameron caught himself watching her sleep, marveling at how much she had grown in strength and spirit. He could feel the scars lingering beneath her smile, but also the healing. Slowly, painfully, the pieces of their shattered lives were coming together. "Good night, Dad," Elena murmured, yawning, curling under the blanket. "Good night, champ," Cameron replied, brushing her hair back gently. "Dream big." Half-truths for protection, the lie about Christina remained, carefully curated and sparing. "Sick in a way," he repeated when asked. No more. No elaboration. No excuses. No room for imagination to spiral into fear. Cameron knew Elena deserved peace, and peace sometimes required shadows to hide the truths too heavy for a 12-year-old's heart. And so they lived, small, quiet victories in a new town, a father guarding his daughter with unwavering vigilance, a girl learning to live again on her own terms. For Cameron, it was more than safety. It was redemption. For Elena, it was life, slowly unfurling from the grip of fear and betrayal. And sometimes, just sometimes, he allowed himself to believe that maybe this could be there forever. Chapter 10, Closure. The late afternoon sun poured gold across the backyard, warming the wooden deck and the small garden Elena had insisted on planting herself. Cameron sat in a folding chair, coffee cooling in his hand, while Elena perched cross-legged on the grass, her journal open on her lap. A year had passed since they had fled the shadows of their old life, and in that time, Elena had grown into something stronger than Cameron had dared to hope. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, a steadiness that belied the trauma she had endured. And yet, there were moments, small, lingering, that reminded him she was still a child, searching for pieces of a past that had been violently taken. "Dad," Elena said softly, turning her gaze toward him, "can I ask you something?" Cameron set his mug down, careful to keep his expression neutral. He had learned to read the pauses before her questions, the tension behind her voice. She wasn't asking lightly. "Of course," he said. Elena hesitated, biting her lip. Do you think Mom will ever come back?" The question hit him with a weight he had been prepared for, yet never easy to carry. A year of careful half-truths, of calling Christina sick and away, had only delayed this inevitable confrontation. Cameron inhaled slowly, letting the dry scent of grass and pine fill his lungs. He needed her to understand, not with excuses, not with lies, but with truth. "Sit down," he said, patting the grass beside him. Elena obeyed, shifting until her knees pressed lightly against his leg. He took her small hands in his, roughened from years of combat, and held them gently. "Elena, it's time you know the truth." Her eyes widened slightly, and a flicker of fear passed over her features. Cameron squeezed her hands. "Christina, your mother, she made choices. Choices that hurt you. Choices that let Dennis hurt you." Elena's mouth opened, then closed again, as if tasting the words before she could speak. She let him? Cameron's throat tightened. Yes, she let him. She chose him over you. Over your safety. Over what was right. The wind stirred, lifting Elena's hair across her face. She brushed it back with a trembling hand, her small fingers pale against her sun-kissed cheeks. For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the distant call of a bird and the faint rustle of leaves. I don't understand, Elena whispered finally. Why would she let that happen? Cameron swallowed, a heaviness pressing down on him that no battlefield had ever brought. He had faced enemies who had wanted to kill him, fires that could consume a village, betrayals that shattered trust. But this was different. This was intimate, personal, a violation of innocence by someone meant to protect it. Some people, Cameron said slowly, choosing each word with care, are weak. Some people choose themselves, even when it's wrong. Your mother, she failed you. She failed to protect you when it mattered most. Elena's small hands tightened around his. Does that mean she's gone? Yes, Cameron said gently, but firmly. She's gone, Elena. She made her choices, and there's no coming back from that. Not for her. Not for you. Not for anyone who matters in this family. Elena's lips pressed together, a mix of grief and understanding flashing across her face. That's not what mothers do, she said softly, almost to herself, and yet loud enough for Cameron to hear. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. No, that's not what mothers do. And that's why you'll never have to worry about being hurt like that again. I promised you that. And I meant it. Reflections on sacrifice. Cameron pulled her into a hug, feeling the slight weight of her still small frame against his chest. He held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, her clothing, the faint trace of sunscreen from the day's activities. In that embrace, he allowed himself to acknowledge the cost of the war he had fought. He had lost his marriage, yes. Christina's betrayal had left scars deeper than any bullet-wound or explosive blast he had endured overseas. His career in the army had ended abruptly, a casualty of the personal vendetta that had consumed him. His innocence, the simplicity of a life he had once imagined for himself with a family, had vanished like smoke on the wind. But in that moment, holding Elena, Cameron recognized that those losses were eclipsed by the victory that truly mattered. Her life, her safety, her recovery. Every decision he had made, the lies, the calculated moves, the cold strategies, had led to this single, unshakable truth. She was alive. She was free. She was his to protect, his to guide, and she would never again face the horrors that had once threatened to consume her. Elena's growth. Pulling back slightly, Cameron looked into her eyes. You've grown so much this year, Elena. Smarter, stronger, wiser than most adults I know. Elena's cheeks flushed pink, pride shining through the lingering shadows of doubt. I learned from you, she admitted, and from everything that happened. I'm still scared sometimes, but I'm not like I used to be. You never will be, Cameron said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Fear doesn't make you weak. What you do with it, how you rise above it, that's what counts. She nodded, a small, determined smile tugging at her lips. I want to be brave. Like you, but better. I want to be brave and kind. Cameron felt a surge of emotion, one he couldn't mask with the calmness of a soldier. You already are, he said, and you're going to keep getting braver every day. I'll be here, always. A father's vigilance. Even as Elena's life began to bloom again, Cameron's vigilance never waned. He watched over her with the eyes of a father who had faced unimaginable threats and emerged hardened, yet tender. Every smile, every laugh, every quiet evening reading a book or strumming a guitar was a victory. Every moment she was safe was a triumph over the darkness that had once threatened to consume their lives. He knew the scars of the past would never fully disappear, but he also knew she was resilient. And so he let her grow in freedom, under his watchful gaze, offering love, guidance, and protection in equal measure. Acceptance. Elena squeezed his hand, her gaze steady now, The earlier questions answered, the confusion settled. I understand, Dad. She let him hurt me, and she chose him. That's not what mothers do. Cameron nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Exactly. And now you know, you don't have to carry that burden. Ever. They sat together on the grass, the sun casting long shadows across the backyard. The day waned, but Cameron didn't care about time. For him, the years ahead were irrelevant compared to the moment he had now, a moment of safety, of healing, of truth finally spoken and accepted. He held her close, rocking gently, listening to her soft, even breathing. He allowed himself the rare luxury of relief, the understanding that his sacrifices, the lost marriage, the ended career, the innocence he had surrendered to fury and vengeance, had not been in vain. He had won the only war that truly mattered, Elena's life. And as she leaned into him, small and strong and unbroken, Cameron Stafford knew that, despite everything, they were finally free.